Hey, I'm Duke on Twitch. If you want to support the channel and greensunzenith.com, you can find my Patreon, merch store, and singles store, where you can buy singles through TCG Player or Card Hoarder in the video description. If you want to get in contact, you can also find all that info in the description below for things like donation deck lists or just wanting to reach out. Alright, let's get right into it. Hey team, welcome back to Dukes on Twitch. A little bit sick, but hopefully my voice is adequate. This is Green-White Maverick, probably one of the least played archetypes of Maverick, which is pretty tough seeing where it all began. Recently I've been spending a bit of time updating the primers on the Green Sun Zenith around Abzan punishing and moving into Naiad Depths, but Green-White is also one that I do want to update with a bit more of a guide in 2023, of course, for how to take the two color shell to an event and do pretty well. So what I've been doing is recently kind of just going back and seeing how the deck first came out. Obviously Luis took it to a tournament in 2011 just after Green Sun Zenith had come out and had a deck that actually played 8th Vial, which was very cool. This list is something that obviously turned into what we now know as Maverick, and he performed pretty well over the few years with it. There's also a piece that I go back to every now and then called How to Beat Everything Using Savannah, written by Drew Levin in 2011. But it's a piece that I really like, and it kind of takes you back to the basics of Maverick and Green-White, and it's kind of like what I love to do when there's a new metagame. Start off with Green-White, see how it plays, see where the missing pieces are, and then really evaluate which colors or color is going to do the most for you. Do you need Pyroblasts? Do you need sweepers like Plague Engineer? Do you need to grind? Do you need a bit more oomph in things like Minsk or maybe Grist? And I think the tough part is that Green-White is kind of the training ground for a lot of Mavericks, and then you move on to a different archetype and Green-White gets left behind. So this build is using that extra slot and the space that not having a third color gives you with an engine, because I think in Green-White these days, if you do want to play it competitively, there's a lot of questions to be answered. You know, why aren't you splashing a color? If you're playing two colors, why aren't you playing something like Green-White Depths? Typically the deck seen before you before Naiad Depths sort of evolved out of it. And I think the big reason for Green-White has always been the mana base. The mana base is really strong. You have access to multiple basics. You have a pretty clear game plan as well. You typically don't have as much interaction or reactive spells to your opponent's plays, but you still have some pretty powerful things to set up, including cards like Knight the Reliquary, or in this case White Plume and Saga, which is where I'm moving towards, especially while White Plume is legal in the format for however long that will be. And obviously Saga as well is a really powerful engine that can just gain you a lot of virtual advantage over the course of a game. And if the rest of the deck can keep you in that game, Saga is obviously going to become even more powerful. The other engine that I think you could easily fit into Green-White is a Stoneforge Mystic package, but I think I'm going to start off with the Saga build and the White Plumes. This deck obviously wants to try to get out a Mana Accelerant on turn 1, either Noble Hierarch Birds or Dryad Arbor, and we have 9 ways to do that, which is pretty great. If we don't have those in the opening, we also have the 3 Once Upon a Times to go and find Nobler Birds. This sets us up in a really nice position for either hopefully a turn 2 White Plume or Knight, or potentially hold up Endurance, or something like a double spell where we can play both Thalia and Mum, or potentially Thalia and Wasteland, or even get Saga online. So it's obviously a few things as of turn 2 that you can do within the shell that are going to be really, really nice. The elemental cards, I think, are another way to keep up with the power level of the format. and that's through Endurance and Solitude in this list. I really wanted to find room for more copies, but it was just really hard to fit them in, especially with the once version. I think that consistency is just a word you hear a lot about Legacy Maverick, and I think once only builds on that consistency. And once, of course, is really powerful as it allows you to find what you want. It doesn't have to be a land, it doesn't have to be a creature. It can be either depending on the situation. And obviously in a deck with free spells like Endurance and Solitude, I think it's a pretty sweet drop here. And where I've kind of made the considerations is the 4th Mum, the 4th Thalia, the 4th White Plume. I didn't want to cut a land or a mana dork for the onces because of the 3 sagas. I wanted to make sure we had still enough physical mana accelerants, and then also enough lands to make sure that once we lose the sagas, we are still making land drops and building out our mana. The knights in this version are still threats. There's still ways to draw up powerful lands, but I wouldn't say they're at the forefront of the deck. The 3 CMC threat of choice in this version is definitely White Plume, and I think we've seen why with the recent results of the deck within Legacy. White Plume also covers some abilities of other creatures, like Scrib Ranger, allowing you to untap a creature in your opponent's upkeep, which is really nice. This deck obviously can really benefit from that, either by giving protection with Mum to get through blockers and then untapping Mum in their upkeep, or even getting additional mana off cards like Noble Hierarch or Birds or Dryad Arbor. I've also gone with Knight of Autumn here over Outland Liberator for 2 main reasons. One is that it leaves behind a body before it trades with something, which is really nice. So it's typically a 2-for-1, and against a metagame of initiative, I really want to have as many bodies on the board as possible. The second nice little upgrade is that it also pitches to both Endurance and Solitude, whereas Outland Liberator only pitches to Endurance. The board is, in my opinion, pretty well targeted towards a lot of the metagame right now, and for me that's Blue-Red Delver, Initiative, and fast combo decks looking to go under Initiative and Blue-Red Delver. So interaction for combo is either turn 1 in Deafening Silence, or typically free in cards like Mindbreak Trap, Surgical, Endurance, and Force of Vigor. So looking at that sort of turn 0, turn 1 interaction against combo, and then just a few cards there. For Blue-Red Delver we have Endurance and Path to Exile, and then for Initiative we obviously have Path to Exile, and potentially an Endurance. Sometimes the Flash is nice against cards like, I guess decks like Endurance, because you get to steal the initiative maybe when they don't expect it. But obviously Endurance is just such a great card against some of the painter decks as well, and some of the sort of the slower decks entering the combo side of the format, whether that's Painter or Cephalid Breakfast. Endurance against those is fine. Endurance not as effective against Cephalid, but can be okay. No Questing Beast either. Questing Beast is a big one, but I kind of find that Shadow Spear in this matchup, or at least in this match list, is kind of the ability to make all my creatures Questing Beast. Trample is huge in this deck, especially for a White Plume with Exalted, or a huge Knight of the Reliquary, and of course Trample can just be really great at stealing the initiative as well, making sure that your opponent can't just chop block with creatures and has to really go kind of all in on a block, or accept they're going to lose the initiative. I've chosen Soul Guide as the other target for Saga. I did want to have 2 targets in the deck, and Lantern's nice because against the graveyard decks where you want it, it's going to be great to have access to it. And if it's not relevant, you can just cycle it, which is pretty sweet. Haywire Might was the other consideration, and also Gingerbrute. Gingerbrute's an interesting one because it is a haste creature, but I don't think that's as relevant as I would like it to be, because if you have the Saga, you're most likely getting constructs, so you're most likely in a position where your opponent believes you will have a creature to attack with to get the initiative, but Gingerbrute can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste is a pretty nice way to get through opposing creatures, especially because you can float the mana off the Saga once it hits the 3rd chapter and then use that mana for Gingerbrute. So I think Gingerbrute is something that I'd love to test, but I just don't have the guts right now to test it. But yeah, I think this deck is a pretty cool way to start with green-white. I think that if you are playing green-white, it should be green-white splash Saga or White Plume, or green-white splash Stoneforge Mystic package, or something similar, because you do have those cards that aren't being played in a version like Abzan or Punishing or Naya. So you want to make use of those slots with really powerful cards, and I think those cards want to be an engine where you kind of have not necessarily a second plan or a backup plan, but just something that synergizes well within the deck, whether that's White Plume, Saga, or Stoneforge Mystic. But yeah, that's kind of the deck tech. I think I'll take it through a league at some point this week, and we'll see how it goes. But let me know in the comments. What do you think of green-white right now? If you were playing the deck, what sort of engine would you move towards? And yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.